Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AAIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, September 14th, episode 248. Today, current DEI practices will never work because they are fundamentally wrong. What sounds like a provocative statement from DEI consultant and TEDx speaker Fred Falker is more of a battle cry for those who really want inclusion in the workplace to join forces and march right through the interference that is on the front line holding our employees back. For leaders who feel they're trapped, fighting against the pressures and opponents of DEI initiatives, this thought leader is offering his hand because there's only one way out, and he believes it's together. All this and more on This Week at Work.
Bert, good morning and welcome back to the program.
Good morning. Thanks. I'm happy to be here, Phil. What in the world is that on my head?
What do you mean on your head? Oh, look at that, Bert. What do you got? Is that you got some effects? Are you playing with your?
Isn't he the birthday boy? Is
Yes.
the rumor?
Thank you there, Nick, for making sure everybody's aware that it's my birthday today.
All right, another 29-year celebration for you, Bert Garland. Happy birthday. What we won't do is we won't sing for you on the air. We don't want people to hear those nasty sounds coming across the internet waves here. But happy birthday, Bert. We hope you have a great birthday. We're happy to have you back on the program. We have a fabulous guest, actually one of my business heroes. You know, you have a few people that you meet in your career who give you inspiration, they share insight, and you aspire to be more like. And Fred Falker is just that person for me. From the very first time I met him, when he was one of the top leaders at the St. Louis Zoo and doing some fantastic work at one of the best zoos in the world. And immediately after I met Fred, I was like, that guy's got something about him. And I didn't know much about him at that time, but he had that factor that we call, that it factor. And as I got to know Fred over the years and watch him work very slowly, very methodically, with a lot of persistence. And then I started to meet Fred more frequently, and he spoke at our conference and he spoke at our summits, and I listened to his message. And most recently, I ran into him again at the Missouri SHRM conference, and we just had a hallway conversation, and I walked away again going, gosh, I'd like to be as wise as someone we call G-Dude, right? And his grandkids call him G-Dude. It's a cool name. It's not Pops, it's not Granddad, it's not Grandpa, but it's G-Dude. So G-Dude, Fred Falker, TEDx speaker, welcome back to the program. We're happy to have you on with us today. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Thank you, Phil.
Great. Fred, we're going to get right back to you. We got a lawyer on the clock segment here from Bert Garland, and he's going to get us caught up on all the most recent updates. And then we're going to get right on to our program with you, Fred. So Bert, are you ready let me introduce before you remind me.
I was about to get there.
Questions. Yep. You were going to do it. I know. I ought to just
waiting.
give you the poll question introductions. All right. So we got a couple good questions centered around today's topic. First is, does your organization have a formal DE&I program? So is it a formal program? Yes or no? You can tell us a little bit about it if you do or don't, and why. And then the second question is, and I like this question, Nick, you do such a good job, is when you hear the words diversity, equity, or inclusion, what is the first word that comes to your mind? And so I've been thinking about this one. And I think the first word that comes to mind for me, it's difficult to explain. You got to be careful, but I think I get frustrated. I think my first word is frustrated, because I think I'm still going along the journey to understand exactly what it means. And when I talk with other people, I find that we're in very different places, and that starts to create frustration for me. When their opinions are different than mine, which is why I put this up here, this Sunday reflection, which says, it's okay if we have different opinions. And that is what I don't find when I talk to people about diversity, equity, inclusion, is most people frustrate me because they're not okay that our opinions are different. And I seem to be okay if our opinions are different. It's just our opinions, and that's what it is, as long as they're not harmful in some way. So that's my word, is frustrated. I hope everyone understands that appropriately. With that, Bert, let's kick off. Lawyer on the clock. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Phil.
All right, lawyer.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right. So we are all aware that yesterday the most recent inflation data came out, and it shows that inflation, while still at a very high rate, ticked up a little bit again last month, a little more than expected. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because the unions may be about to heap a little bit more onto the economy's burden here, as the United Auto Workers Union prepares targeted strikes as deal talks with the three major automakers have stalled. The union officials have said they're still very, very far apart on their key priorities. The UAW at these three auto manufacturers represent 150,000 members, and they said that they're prepared to strike these companies in a way they have never seen before. So sounds pretty ominous. They're still very far apart on key issues, including pay raises, cost of living adjustments, pensions, and job security at certain factories. The union has lowered its pay demand from 40% increase over the course of the entire contract, which
I mean, just take that in for a minute. 40% request a 40% increase. That now I get you have to negotiate when you have leverage, and I realize, the automakers feel that there's leverage right now, and probably is on many different levels, but 40% just really appears to be an unreasonable request. I've never had that kind of request in any of my days negotiating union contracts. Have you?
Yeah, it's not even close to that. And if you compound the wage increases that they're seeking, the 40% is actually 46% over the course of the entire contract. Now, what's interesting is that Ford has apparently proposed 20% raises over 4 years, while GM offered 18% and Stellantis offered 17.5%. So they're definitely going to be getting significant raises, but they're still where the automakers are at about half of what the union is still seeking.
Yeah, and I know sometimes in negotiation, my experience also tells me, they're what they first come out with, I might anticipate, a third or a half of that as a reasonable place to settle in, and it sounds like they're not far off from half of the original request.
Well, no. Make sure you're understanding. The original request was 40%, which comes to 46% once raises are compounded. The unions only come down from 40% to 36%. So
yeah, but the companies have already done 17 and what do you say, 20?
20, 18, and 17 and a half.
Yeah. So my point is the companies are already moving towards that halfway mark to meet them there.
Yeah. They're still an ocean apart as far as I'm concerned. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there. So that'll be a blow to the economy either way, because if those wages go up by that much, that's going to eventually flow through to the cost of new cars, or if there's a strike, that'll be an additional burden on the economy. Another one that we need to keep our eye on, and in light of the technical difficulties this morning, I'll probably come back and talk about this in more detail down the road, but everybody should be aware that the Department of Labor, I've been off the last couple of weeks from the program, but the Department of Labor has proposed substantial increases to the salary threshold for white collar exemptions. And Phil, I don't know, have you guys been able to talk about this on the program when I've been off the last 2 weeks?
No, we have not.
Okay, so everybody needs to be aware that the Department of Labor has proposed raising the weekly salary by over 50% from $684 per week to $1,059 per week. That's the equivalent of $55,068. They are also seeking to increase the annualized salary threshold for the exemption for highly compensated employees from $107,432 to $143,988. So this is very significant bump here. In particular, I think the one that most people would be concerned about is if you have managers, supervisors, white collar employees who are making right now more than $35,568 per year, but making less than $55,068. And realistically, I think that 55,068 number, if this goes into effect next year, is probably going to be closer to $60,000. So if you have employees who are making, like I said before, $35,568 per year and probably less than $60,000 per year, you're going to have to look very strongly at their compensation to see if you can bump them above the new salary threshold to keep them exempt. If you cannot keep them exempt, then you are going to have to make them hourly employees. And that means that they're entitled to minimum wage, which wouldn't be a problem there, but then they'd be entitled to overtime. So very big news coming out of the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor issued its notice of proposed rulemaking, which means that they're seeking comments from employers on this and from other stakeholders, individuals from around the country. And we don't know the exact timeline on this, but I would not be surprised if this rulemaking, if it follows a similar path to past increases, I would expect that the final rule would come into effect around the middle of next year. So everybody needs to keep this on their radar.
Yeah, just times are changing, right? And this is why it's important that we do have good compensation strategies and we have good practices as it relates to, you know, our exempt and non-exempt personnel, really as it relates not just to their salary, but their job duties as well, because that all comes into play. Yep. But times are definitely changing, are they not, Bert?
They are. And again, all of this, you know, contributes to the inflationary pressures on the economy. So we'll see what shakes out.
Very good. Anything else from you there, lawyer?
Oh, there's plenty, but we'll move on with the rest of the program. How about that?
All right, that's great. Thank you very much, Bert, for that. We appreciate it. Fred Falker, we're going to turn our attention to you. And if I understood our introduction the right way, you've made a pretty bold statement when you say that current DE&I practices will never work because they are fundamentally wrong. So first, let's just fact check. Is that a statement you've made, Fred? And if so, can you help us understand what you mean by that statement?
Sure, it's a statement, Phil, that I make all the times, and I guess it really does depend on what you mean by work. There's certainly an awful lot of people who are working awfully hard in the field who believe that they are making progress. There are people who are not in the field but are impacted by the field who don't want to see any of that progress. And then there's a whole group of other employees and executives that are confused by it. What I think is really critical and what I really want to imply to people who hear that statement is that last year it's thought that about $8 billion was spent on DEI programs. And so when you say that progress is being made a little here and a little there, and I don't think anybody would debate that, but that you're getting pushback over here and over there, then I think we would say as business people, it's not working. It's not doing what it's intended to do. It's not doing what it's needed to do. So to that extent, it's not working, and it can't ever work simply because it's not getting enough buy-in. It's not getting enough people who are willing to be part of the change effort. If you want to change the culture, then you have to have people in the organization who are willing to change, not be changed. One of the things I think is really important, I'll try to be brief here, is that inside organizations that have programs and that have run them for a while, you'll typically find 4 groups of employees. They are the frustrated employees, they are the angry employees, they are the ambivalent employees, and they are the weary employees. The frustrated are people who, in many cases, are putting in an awful lot of effort, very intense. They are the choir, they are the believers, they have strong, powerful whys, and to some extent, they are right in the change that's needed, but that's a very small group. They are the people who are pushing it. Their frustration is that change is not happening quick enough. The ambivalent are people who are largely supportive of these efforts. They want things to be different. They think things should be different, but they've got lives. This is not their only thing that matters. They've got kids in school. They're looking for their own promotion. It is wrong to say that they are against these efforts. They're not. They're just not all in, because they are all in about other things that matter. You've got the weary, and frankly, the wearier people are just tired of hearing about it all the times. In their minds, everything can't be about D, E, and I. It simply can't be. You've got some percentage of people who are angry, but that is a small percentage. The problem is that you've got a small group of people who are frustrated, a small group of people who are angry, but most of the people, probably 70, 80% in most organizations, are in the middle. They are bystanders. You need, for culture to change, you need the behavior of people to change. And if we don't buy it, if we don't have a strong enough why, regardless of the reason, we won't make that change. And the frustration is real.
Yeah, that's a great way of breaking it down and having it in those four groups. Now, you made a comment I would just want to explore here. You said those people, those leaders who are willing to change, not willing to be changed. I think it was a comment that you made. Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, part of the reason, if we think about organizational culture, we've got to inspire people to change their behavior. Unfortunately, much of what goes on in the DEI world is kind of not, I would say, a requirement that you change, the pressure to change, and people fight that. Sometimes the people that are fighting that are not enemies to what you propose. They are really enemies to what's being done. And so the frustration comes in. You're going to tell me how to do this and that, when the truth is, in order to have an inclusive environment, people have to say, this is important to us. And what's important is that we find a place where we believe that our lives are being enriched. We find a place where we can say that we feel that we belong, that this is a great place to be, a great place to work. In my mind, the work that we should be doing is not the work of saying the place is fair and equitable and professional. It is something well above that. The place that where you feel that you belong is a place that is special. When you look at culture, do you want to have a culture where most people say it's pretty good around here? Or do you want to have a culture where people start saying this is a great place to work? When we look at inclusion, we really have to start thinking about, okay, pretty good, not bad is not nearly good enough. You think about it in terms of engagement, those are the folks who are saying sort of, kind of, maybe a little bit engaged, as opposed to those top line people that say this is a great place to be.
Yeah, there's a big difference between pretty good or it's a nice place to work to this is a great place to work. I worked with one organization, and what they wanted, they called it their love score. They wanted people to use the word love. They were like, I love working here. I love my customers. I love my coworkers. And it was an expression beyond good, right?
That's a huge, huge difference, huge change. It requires leaders to be different, but it requires people in that organization to start saying, hey, we care about each other.
Right.
We are working in a place that matters to us. What I personally do is important to our customers, to other people in this organization. I have a sense that I belong. I feel like I'm an owner. I am allowed to grow and develop and contribute. If you think about ownership, it is above and beyond doing what I get paid to do. It is my extra contribution. When I'm owning something, it's because I'm putting something into it. Obviously, it's a place where we feel psychologically safe. If we
Yeah.
believe in what we're doing as an organization, whether it's our products or our services or what we're doing to make our community a better place, when you have that, then you have a responsible way of looking at inclusion. Inclusion is not having a seat at the table. Inclusion is not representation. Inclusion is how employees feel about an organization. It is a condition. It is not something that we can will into existence. It's something that, frankly, organizations have to work toward. They have to work hard at it, but it requires that employees say, I want to be part of this culture. And the truth is, when we get it right, employees do want to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great lead into this next question. And if working with employers every day, and you do some fantastic work with employers every day as well. What I find is that leadership is feeling a different set of pressures, right? There's a small portion that are frustrated, as you mentioned. There's others that are angry. There's others that are ambivalent, as you mentioned. What is it that the leaders are feeling to move their organization forward? This is, HR leaders, the C-suite, they're under pressure to do something.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to use this as a lead way. I want to look at the scorecard from our survey here real quick, Nick, if you can pull that up. So does your organization, remember the question that I asked you now, but does your organization have a formal DE&I program? And I'm going to pull out that 46.6% of our listeners here today are saying, no, we have no plans to pursue one. And so the pressure there has led me to no. I'm not going to do anything as far as having a formal program. Formal was the key question in that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the pressures and how maybe to consider looking at them?
Well, I think certainly the pressures are how do we create a positive, better organizational culture? For me, inclusion is the absolute big word. What are we doing to build a culture of inclusion? Inside of inclusion, I put the diversity part. I put that inside of inclusion because that's the kind of, for many people, that's the kind of organization that you want to work for. But inclusion is the big thing. If everybody is not winning, if everybody is not a winner, then you won't get to inclusion. So it will not work to the extent that some employees feel that they will lose. The pressure on senior leadership is that there are forces saying that we must do something, and then there are other forces saying you shouldn't be doing any of that. So that the compromise in many cases is having a program that sadly in many cases is not producing great results. The biggest thing I believe about the field right now is that many people who are not doing much are not doing it because they don't hear about the great successes. I being in the field but not of the field, believe that when we start producing outcomes, then these programs will be strengthened. We'll start producing outcomes when you get people to buy into the idea that we're doing something together, something that can be extraordinary. You mentioned that love quotient, whatever you want to call it. It is a special place. If you think about engagement surveys, you don't want to be that 50%, 30% company. You don't want to be in the middle. You want to be able to say to people, this is not an okay place to work. This is a great place to work. This is a wow place to be. And you do that by having a culture where people feel that they belong. And that means everybody. That's not including some people and having others feel left out. Part of the reason that DEI will not work is because it divides, unfortunately, people when it absolutely should not be doing that. And there's no reason for it to do that.
So when I'm talking with leaders, I'll be curious in your experience, And if I consider that 46% said, no, we don't have a program and we don't plan to have one. And my interpretation of some of that population is I don't want to do it because it creates more problems for me than I have today. And I interpret that as I'm not equipped and I don't really know what to do. And I don't believe that I can make an impact that's worth the investment. That's really what I'm interpreting from the leaders when they're saying that. What's your interpretation to that? But what would you give? What would be the process of considering to make purposeful change in their workplace?
I think the last thing that you said is the thing that makes the most sense. It is to make purposeful change. And if you're making purposeful change, then the labels that we attach to it become less important. For some people, calling anything, talking about DE&I or d.e.i.b or all of the various labels that get attached to it, that's poison already. This idea is that we want an inclusive culture, a culture that gives people a sense of belonging. We want people in our organization that add value to our organization. We want to be a organization that is contributing to the health welfare of this community. When you think of it like that, as opposed to a label, as opposed to a program, then it's easy to say we don't have a program. But do you have a culture that includes people? Do you have a culture where people feel that they belong? Do you have a culture that you could credibly say is a fair culture? Do you have that? To the extent that you have that, then you don't have to call your program anything. I'm not opposed to calling it something, but it has to be bigger than a quote program. If this is not an effort to make your organization different, if it's on another track, if it's not part of the senior leadership's charge, then it's not likely to work. In my experience, when you put something off in a corner and give it a name, and senior leadership doesn't say we are responsible for this, then it is likely not to work. My advice is always that the senior leaders commit and say, we're responsible for the numbers. We're not running what happens, but this is on our plate of big, big things to do. And there's only 3 or 4 or 5 of those things. But having a great culture is one of those things. And we're going to monitor it. We're going to do what's necessary. We're going to bring in the talent to help us get that done. But we're going to be really clear about we are taking responsibility. When we make this commitment, we're not going to put it on Fred or Phil or Mary or Kate and say it's your job. It would be like having a safety director and saying that he or she was responsible for safety. No responsible leaders in an organization would do that, and we shouldn't be doing that with inclusion either. It is
that's a good way to put it, because most business leaders will stand up and say, I'm responsible for safety in our workplace.
Absolutely.
I mean, excuse me, that's a great way of putting that. All right, Fred, one closing thought, if you could share a message, any message you want to share, what to do, what not to do, a success tip, anything at all that you could just share with our audience. It's wide open. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. You got 1 minute left here. What would you share with the audience?
I would share that any work that you do that keeps people apart, separates them into groups, is doomed to fail. That this effort has to be about creating better relationships inside an organization between people. If your leaders go through a program like this, and you're thinking about how do you bring in developmental efforts, they all have to be consistent. When I worked with AAIM as part of the St. Louis, we wanted to make sure that everything that we did always reinforced other things. So leaders didn't learn this and as in separate packets. Instead, they learned how to be better leaders. I believe strongly that leaders should know what to do. They should know when to do it, and they should be able to do it. And if your efforts aren't leading there, you're creating more confusion and more doubt. know what to do, know when to do it, and be able to do it. And then if you give them a strong enough why, and the why is about the kind of place that we want to be in and the kind of leader I want to be in. Most leaders are not saying to themselves, I want to exclude people. But exclusion is not the big enemy of inclusion. It's failing to include people. That's something that leaders can learn. Who are the people right now that I treat okay? That is simply not good enough. I treat some people really well. Can I get myself to the place where I'm in being an inclusive leader? My employees, the vast majority of them, can look up and say, this person is a great leader. When I think about leadership, I think about that person. Not feel afraid is okay. You know, just like we say how we want the organizational culture to be, we want leaders. You have to have leaders where people say, wow, she's wonderful. She is outstanding. I mean, she knows us. We know her. She gets the work done. We love working. I do extra working for her. That is how we get there.
That is exactly it there, Fred. This is why I look up to you so much. I think you have lots of wisdom. I hope to work yet with you for many years here at AIM and in your ventures. How do people get in touch with you, Fred? What's the best way for them to contact you?
The best way is through my email, which is fred.falker@falkerconsulting.group.
All right. Very good. If you have any questions or hard times reaching Fred, you can always reach out to us here at AIM and we'll put you in touch with him. Fred, thank you again for being on our program. I think this is our second or third time. I hope to have you back again today. Good luck to you and all the things that you're doing, G-Dude, and we will be back on air next week at 7:30 Central Time. Nick, thank you for doing such a good job getting us back up on the air today. And until then, go out and be good to people. Bye-bye.
Be good to people.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link aimea.org/thisweekatwork or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.